I was going to call this video Christians, what is that? Salvation is of the Jews. Where is that? Right here. John 4:22. Now, I actually took this out of context. Now, I also said in coupling with this that Christian was not in the Bible, and I actually made a mistake. I read the whole New Testament all the way through last year, and for some reason didn't remember seeing Christian in it. And I was wrong. There's 3 places where it's at. Acts, which is after Christ was resurrected, where the apostles are going out into the world preaching the gospel, okay? And the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. And so by Acts 26, people knew this term Christian, so almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian, said Agrippa unto Paul. And after Acts is 1 Peter 4:16, yet if any man suffer as a Christian, and let's put this in the whole context actually, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. For the time is come that the judgment must begin at the house of God, and if it first begin at us, Christians, well shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God. So I made a mistake on that. Funny how I decided to search these things right before I started making this video. So sorry about that mistake, but here's the actual context of the salvation of the Jews thing, okay? Because this is while Christ was still alive, okay? And he was telling her, the hour cometh when you shall neither be in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. And ye worship, I hate ye, I want to say you. You worship, you know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Jews worship God, as far as the context of during Christ's life. Okay, so I did make a mistake on that. And the next verse, but the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. He's speaking of the preaching to the Gentiles and how the Jews are really no longer the chosen race, okay, and that everybody else is welcome in, because there are other true worshipers out there that know that there is one God. And they don't worship basically what this woman is worshiping, which is pagan, Babylonian. I had falsely said these things in one of these 2 videos. We should stop using the term Illuminati, which I'm still behind the thesis statement of it, but I made that mistake. At this point on Christmas Day, Saturnalia, Yalda, 2014, I don't know yet what I'm going to call this video now, but I do know what I'm going to go through here. I kind of feel like sharing with YouTubers, whoever's willing to watch, my path through Christianity, which I'm not done with. But I just want to share some stepping stones along the way that I think are worthwhile to go through. And I don't think that there's any correct denomination or individual that knows everything, okay, as concerning the Bible and such, okay. I've found pieces of information from all sorts that are right on, and while all of these sources also push false information, whether purposely or not, because some of them I don't think do. Some of them I do think do push false information, but that's another story. Now, I was raised in a Methodist church, and my falling away from Christianity actually started when I was about 6-7 years old, and I first learned about Santa being a fantasy, that Santa wasn't real. And everything's kind of come full circle, so to speak, since then. But that really, really bothered me, and I had a severe mistrust with authority after that, because it's like, I'm supposed to trust these people and they're lying to me? What's wrong with that? There's something wrong with that. And so ever since then, I really didn't trust authority, so it's no wonder that some would label me a conspiracy theorist. I resent that because it's become an ad hominem attack, but I just don't trust those in authority figures or in authority positions. and I haven't ever since Santa Claus. How people justify lying even with something as like Santa Claus to themselves, I do not understand. And it really makes me mad. Still to this day, I would never ever lie to my kids, I'll tell you that right now. If a controversial subject ever came up, I would just straight tell them, no, I'm not discussing it with you at this age, you're too young. We'll discuss it at another time. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that if this part bores you, fast forward until I get to this guy, Hal Lindsey. But until then, I'm going to keep it on this just so you know what I'm talking about, what led me to this. Because this is about highlighting some sources that are worth checking out, but like I said, none are perfect. I also want to know that I'm doing this because I see some false doctrines out there that I've learned are false that I didn't know were false at all, and I don't necessarily fault the people spreading some of them as bad people, okay? There's good intentions behind it with many of them. So anyway, right as I was hitting my teens, my life kind of fell apart. Parents got divorced, blah, blah, blah. And I actually had my first serious prayer, which, by the way, you're supposed to pray in your closet, meaning your private dwelling. And I did this. Nobody was around. And I didn't want to be living a lie because people around me were fucking liars, and I hated it. So I simply prayed that I wanted to know the truth about this existence. And funny enough, I think it was that very week that it kind of started. Though it kind of, in a way, started before then, because, I knew the Kennedy assassination official story was bunk before I was even 10 years old. It was obvious that with their ad hominem attacks against conspiracy theorists, using that term and stuff, okay? So anyway, how it started after that prayer was an America Undercover documentary on HBO about Satanism in high up in with corporate CEOs and stuff, and how it was most rampant there. I recall it featured Ted Gunderson, whose name I didn't even remember, and I came across like 10 years later, and I was amazed that I remembered his face, but I have a very good recollection of faces nonetheless. A few years ago, I tried to search for this episode of America Undercover. It aired about like 1993, I believe, and yeah, 93. And I could not find it at all. Like it was scrubbed from the history of the show. But I know for a fact I saw it. Even still after that, I didn't understand, I didn't have the reflective capability at that time that I do now. So I ended up kind of turning away from God because I was so pissed about my personal situation and how I felt my life was going to be shit. And from there, I got exposed to Satanism, witchcraft, and New Age bullshit, which is really old age Babelism, going back to the Tower of Babel. I read books on witchcraft, and the most memorable New Age book I read was Nothing in This Book is True, but it's exactly how things are. Though that was later on. That was when I was like 17. It was by a guy named Jeff Frissell, and it was actually on the band Tool's website for like their favorite books list. But even when I was like 13, 14 years old, I was reading Anton LaVey's Book of Satan, the Necronomicon, though that, from what I understand, that's a fraudulent book. I even unwittingly viewed a good portion of Jordan Maxwell's Matrix of Power video when I was 14 or 15. I later recognized him when I came across him in my 20s, and I was like, oh, I've seen this guy before, And I actually got way into listening to him talk and like looking at his website and stuff. And though he does have some insights, most of what he has discovered comes from Manly Palmer Hall, whom he does admit is a good friend of his. Now, that doesn't mean he's not an honest guy, but he is into the New Age, really Babelism. And I think it's completely possible that his good intentions have been manipulated in his life. But he's a very, very smart man nonetheless. Now, through all this in my teen years, I was claiming I was an atheist basically up until I was 16 or 17. I was really just mad at God because I didn't understand why I was going through what I was going through. I didn't understand that it was there to make me stronger and to give me wisdom for later in life. And basically I was in denial of God's existence and benevolence. And I personally feel this is the state of mind of any atheist out there. Argument for another day. because the real point of this is to show good sources of learning about the history of Christianity and Judaism as well, since that's what the Old Testament is. So then when I was like 17, I started reading the Old Testament from the start, and I don't think I got past the Torah barely at all, okay? And at some point during probably about 17, I actually used a page from the book of Job and rolled a joint with it because somebody told me that you could roll a joint with Bible paper. Then I quit reading it, and later I found that, when I later came back a few years later to actually try to read the whole thing all the way through, I ended up stopping at the book of Job at that very page that I ripped out, which I, in reflection, find is kind of metaphorical for what happened in my life after that, where I kind of lived the book of Job, except I actually did curse God and say bad things about God. So when I was 19 or 20, I came across this guy, Hal Lindsey, and I read one of his books. It was one of the ones about Armageddon, Apocalypse, maybe Apocalypse Code, Final Battle. It was one of those. I can't remember which one at this point. But it was, I actually pretty much believed it at the time because of my nescience of the context of the whole Bible. For the most part, what I had read was the book of Revelation because I always had, for some reason, an interest in it. Maybe, because I was suicidal and depressed for much of my life. Although I will never say don't read anything by anybody, take this guy with a grain of salt if you ever read his stuff, okay? And one of his biggest faults, other than the rapture, which I disagree at least with the use of that word, has to do with the mark of the beast, which I'm sorry it's not in the future. And I will prove that in a later video on this subject. This is just part one here. But I don't feel it's wrong to look at deceivers and their deceptions, and I think this guy is a deceiver, flat out. So after this, I had some very weird experiences, including experiencing miracles, and I'm just not going to talk about them, including a near-death experience that I should be dead, okay? But I'm not going to go into detail. I don't really care if anybody believes me or not. But I do believe things happen for a reason, and I think this has to do with the concept of, predisposition? Nonetheless, I went through a very hard time in my 20s. And then a few years ago, I kind of started coming back to Christianity, and it kind of started with this channel, the Fuel Project. See right here. And in particular, this series called Know Your Enemy, which is it's worthwhile watching. Okay, it's not perfect, but nothing. Like I said, I don't think any source is. I also came across Chris White's channel. Where is he? Right here. This guy, and this playlist would probably be what you're looking for as far as debunking David Icke, and Ancient Aliens debunked. And I have read what's his face, Chariots of the Gods. I forget the guy's name. It's in my bedroom. Whatever. Nonetheless, he's still incorrect on the Antichrist, and I will come to that, and I will prove that. So then while listening to Richard Grove's podcast, what's it called? peacerevolution.podomatic.com. And I came across this guy, Walter Veith. What the heck's going on here? Where's the... Okay, Total Onslaught. This series here. If you can read that there. I don't know if it's too small. It's a very good series. This guy's a Seventh-day Adventist. And the Seventh-day Adventist, some say it's a cult, some say it comes out of Freemasonry. They have, I feel, a pretty strong doctrine. One of the points is to do with the Sabbath especially. And they're interesting about prophecy and the day-year principle concerning the book of Daniel. And it was started by this woman named Ellen G. White right here. And she wrote a book called The Great Controversy and numerous others. I have read it, this particular version actually. and it's a very interesting book and worth a read. I also read Life at its Best, which I don't see anything wrong with. Get a tiny bit into her detractors, though.